Throughout the world there are many deserted towns which are forbidden to visitors. These towns are not only unfit for humans but also for surrounding plants and wildlife left behind. These villages are toxic wastelands which have endured severe environmental damage over the years. These ghost towns look like something out of a horror movie and are not fit even for exploring. Today, let's take a look at forbidden towns you're not allowed to visit. Number 5. Centralia, Pennsylvania. During 1962, the government decided to incinerate an enormous pile of rubbish at Centralia's dump. This was a very bad idea, as the town's dump was located on top of an abandoned coal mine, along with most of the town. After the fire consumed the rubbish, it ignited the leftover coal in the coal mine and spread throughout the remaining mine. This created carbon monoxide, which seeped up through the ground. Disturbingly, people in the surrounding homes began to lose consciousness. After sinkholes and cracks started appearing throughout the town, authorities realised they could not stop the fire and relocated the residents. Disturbingly, the fire still remains in the town, and it's been notified that parts of the mine could collapse at any moment, making the ground dangerous to walk on. The town's air is also deadly, blowing out sulphurous steam throughout the holes, which can suffocate a person. Today, this abandoned town remains off limits to the public. Number 4. Pripyat, Ukraine. This town was founded only 2 miles away from the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. The city was renowned for being designed by some of the best architects and was to be an example of how idealistic vision of communism could look. However, during 1986, parts of the Chernobyl exploded after a failed safety test, resulting in radioactive waste being unleashed into the air. The cloud of radiation was so toxic that woodlands surrounding the area simply died. Disturbingly, the Soviet government did not act straight away and waited 36 hours before evacuating the town of Pripyat. At this stage, many residents were showing symptoms of radiation poisoning, and 31 people died within the 1 month of the Chernobyl accident. The World Health Organization and Greenpeace predict that the long-term death toll could eventually be as high as 90,000. Today the town is less radioactive than going through an airport security scanner 3 times. However, studies of the local wildlife show that radiation poisoning is still happening. Birds have significantly smaller brains, trees grow smaller, and there are fewer insects. Number 3. Wittenoom, Western Australia. Wittenoom was the largest town located on Australia's only blue asbestos mine. During the 1940s, mining began to boom in the area and continued for more than 30 years. However, a connection was made between asbestos dust and lung disease, and the Australian government closed down the mine. Sadly, this was too late, as the asbestos had already done irreversible damage to the town and its residents. It was discovered that people who lived in the area were 20 to 83% more likely to die from cancer than the rest of the population, and out of 20,000 people who lived in Wittenoom, 2,000 died from asbestos-related diseases. Amazingly, the government considered cleaning up Wittenoom, but soon decided it would be safer to relocate the people and abandon the town altogether. Throughout the decades, the local government used asbestos as construction material on roads, pipelines, the airstrip, and even golf courses, which has now been banned. People even brought asbestos into their home to use as sandpits to reduce dust around the house. Fibres found in asbestos can easily be inhaled and can pierce a lung, causing inflammation and releasing mutations that promote tumour growth. Just a brief exposure to asbestos can cause mesothelioma and lung cancer. Number 2. Pitcher, Oklahoma. After the discovery of lead and zinc deposits in 1914, the town of Pitcher was born. As both metals were needed during World War I, the town soon grew in population. The town's community was made up of mostly miners, and eventually Pitcher became the largest exporter of zinc and lead in the world. However, during the 1970s, dark times hit the town, and the mining that the town had survived on left behind a toxic byproduct called chat, a chalky substance. This stuff was poisonous, and there was an estimated 178 million tons of it. Chat was infused in the mill sand and was piled around the town. The local townspeople initially had no idea that chat was poisonous and would use the substance to fill up their driveways and even children's sandboxes. Shockingly, families would even have picnics on the chat piles. The high school track team would train on them and children rode their bikes on the chalky substance. It was not until the 1990s where they discovered it was a health risk containing lead, and a staggering 46% of the children tested positive to high levels of lead. Eventually, the town was evacuated, with residents being relocated. Even though the air meets the government's minimum standards, the town is still toxic, and windy days can still blow large amounts of lead throughout the city. Disturbingly, in 2015, over 1,000 migratory birds were discovered dead from zinc poisoning across the town of Pitcher. Number 1. Trace, Kansas. During the early 20th century, lead, zinc and iron ore deposits were discovered, leading to the creation of Trace. The town of Trace supplied most of the ore during World Wars. Years later, during the 1970s, much of the town's environments had been destroyed, and Trace's air had turned deadly. Disturbingly, children who once lived in the town and had played in the contaminated swimming holes would go home with reddish skin. Their parents would assume it was sunburn. However, they later found that they had received chemical burns. Trace residents began to suspect the lead was poisoning them. Blood tests eventually proved them right, and the town was declared unfit for humans. Today, the town is surrounded by millions of tons of lead and zinc mining waste. Similar to the town of Pitcher, mountains of chat flank the town as winds blow the dust throughout the city. Years of mining has left the earth unstable, leading to hundreds of cave-ins, and Trace is still being decontaminated.